Welcome to our very special holiday episode of Rolling Into Your DMs. For some of us, this time of year is spent visiting with our families, whether that be the people who raised you, the persons that got you through your 20s, or whomever it is in your life that you can feel safe to be yourself with. Hopefully, if you play Dungeons & Dragons, you have a D&D family that you can share some holiday cheer during these particularly trying times. In this very special episode, family is the reason for the season, as Chris interviews the person who brought D&D into their life and them into the world, their father, Mick. So, happy holidays from all of us here at Rolling Into Your DMs.
What are you doing, Dad?
Oh, I was chewing gum. Okay, I'll park it. All right.
I can hear it. All right, so...
I don't know how sensitive it was, but okay.
My phone's pretty sensitive, apparently. Today, on our very special episode of Rolling Into Your DMs, we have an interview with my very first Dungeon Master, my dad, Michael Mick Dolinsky. Say hi, Dad.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me, Christina. I really enjoy it. Good to hear you.
It's good to hear you, Father.
Well, thanks. Daughter.
So if we could start, if you could give us your DM qualifications, so to speak.
Well, I mean, I could go back into history. I was kind of mulling this over a little bit. I started playing when I was, I want to say it was the summer right after fourth grade. A neighbor friend, Kurt, said, hey, we play D&D a little bit. You're interested in playing? And unaware of the pitfalls, I said, I agreed to it. And we started, it was basically me, him, and there was two friends named Dave that played, and we played literally every day between, the end of that school year and before fifth grade. And I kind of liken it to like the Beatles and Hamburg. I was destined for the same amount of greatness, but it was kind of like cutting your teeth and learning how to play and how to be a DM. And at that point in time, it was, we kind of did a round robin as DMs, and, the object was to try to kill, the other players. So none of our guys got past like fourth level. I think somebody got to fifth level one time, and, we were amazed. And you kind of learned, and at that point, you're in a fight, so you don't understand as a DM, the storytelling aspect of it so much. But it started to kind of, okay, we're just killing each other all the time. Okay, that wears out after a while. It gets kind of... So then we started adding ideas, and a lot of it is your background, learning. We were reading the Shannara series, for example. I had already read the Tolkien series. So then, as far as being able to set up storylines, you needed, something to start with, some kind of basis. And it's like, okay, if you look at Sword of Shannara, at least the first book, it's, your traditional adventure, as are the Tolkien books. So those were good blueprints to kind of do it. And, Kurt, I think, was the one first kind of taking the initiative and doing we always did dungeon crawls. But he would have an overarching storyline for that dungeon crawl instead of just going from room A to room B to room C to room D to room E. And so that made me think, oh, maybe I should do that. And that's kind of getting back to my analogy with the Beatles. They learned how to play the songs. They learned how, to harmonize and do those kinds of things. And that summer, I learned how to do that. We started buying some of the TSR products, which again had, I think Fort Bashgar, I want to say, was the one that sticks out in my mind. That was a basic adventure that you could purchase. And it also gave you some, so we could this way, kind of thing. So I was kind of I guess, getting back to the original question, my qualifications, I guess, I started there. I probably played until I was 40-ish. And so I have a lot of experience under my belt. I'm not any, necessarily accolades or anything like that, but a lot of successful campaigns that I've run. I hope that answers your question.
So did you start then? Was that AD&D?
Yeah, we started with the AD&D, and then, which was the second edition, I believe. Then we went to 3, had to rebuy all the books again. And you get it. I mean, there was improvements sometimes, with the platform, but, it forced you to buy all the books again. So, to keep TSR at that point and, in money, that was a good strategy. We played 3.5, probably played the most. just a little for, when I started was like we had the hit table was in like the second Dragon magazine or first one. You bought this little handbook, and I can't remember what it was. It had a bunch of like the class, the levels. But then you got the player's handbook. You got the Dungeon Master's Guide. The monster manuals, of course, and things that you could broaden your campaign and come up with. And some of them were good. Some of them were kind of a waste of money. It was kind of hit or miss. You're familiar with like the Planescape, for example. Which is much later, obviously.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, but that really, that opened up so many possibilities when you start talking multiverse instead of just your main campaigning land. But now you could go to go to hell, literally.
Go to different hells.
And go to different hells. So that opened a lot of different, and there was so many, each plane being so much different, added a lot of different things to it. There's other things they did, Red Steel, which I did submit. I don't know if you recalled that, but Red Steel was originally, TSR said, hey, we're going to create a whole new setting, and you can submit your stuff for it. And I submitted my stuff, my campaign setting, but obviously didn't win. And as you can see, Red Steel hasn't really stuck around for too long since then. So yeah, it was what it was. But they try to keep it interesting. And that's the best part of it. The best part for me as a DM was that I liked the storyline, and I think that's what. When you first start as a DM, that's something you don't even really think about. You're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, or trying to keep the party together, and try not to kill everybody. And but if you have an overarching storyline, then you can go into other places and make it entertaining for the characters. I like to not be too specific. A lot of times I would just plan. We used to play every Friday. And later on with the last group I was playing with, and I would probably earlier in the week I would say, okay, this is where they're at. I know where they're going eventually, but I got to plan enough stuff to keep them entertained for 3 or 4 hours. All right, so they're here. What can we do? I know these players well enough. I know kind of where they're going to go, how they think. And that would be pretty much my process for running a campaign. Seemed to work pretty well.
How many, do you know how many campaigns run, whether they're your own or have you run a campaign from a module or parts of a module?
Well, I have done that. Although, and I think when we played too, I've had this world that I created a long time ago, and over the years, I've, added things to it, and I've kept it all. And it's a good starting point, I always think, because I know it's my world. So it makes me a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier for me to make decisions about, okay, is this going to happen or would that happen? Whereas I think it's a lot more difficult, even though a module's kind of, set out for you, and that, okay, well, I didn't create this, so I'm not quite sure how I want to approach it. Whereas if I know it's in my setting that I created, it's like, okay, these people do this, this creature does that, and it kind of all, fits together like a puzzle. But, different strokes for different folks. There's some other, other people that might like that. What I like to do would to take modules and fit them inside my campaign. And I might, change some things around and make it fit. That could be a lot of fun. But and there's other people that, I was, you were gonna, well, go ahead, ask the next question. I'm sorry.
No, you can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk.
No. Okay. Well, I was going to give you an example. You were mentioning about, I did get to visit the office of TSR, back, oh God, how long ago was that? I was still working at Partners. So I was probably mid-30s, somewhere around there, maybe early 30s. And one of the store managers that I worked with was in Schaumburg, Illinois. He's like, hey, I know some of the guys that work at the warehouse, for TSR in Lake Geneva. You want to come out and we'll play our campaign a little bit, and then we'll go out there. and get to see the warehouse and meet Peter and that kind of thing. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. So me and Dave Gilman took a road trip out there. And what I was getting back to, and what I'm trying to emphasize is the importance of storyline. But it can also be a pitfall. And so we went to play this other member, this friend of his friend campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And they played like every Saturday night or whatever it was. And he sat behind the screen and he rolled all our rolls, and he rolled all the rolls behind the screen, so he never saw it. And it sucked the fun right out of the game. He basically just told us what the story was going to be. We didn't really, we could say what we were going to do, but we never knew if, we got a critical hit or something like that. That's the fun. It's the interaction between the players and the dungeon master. And that was like one of the things I learned from that experience was like, I was bored out of my skull, just listening to this guy telling me a story, which, for some people that's fine. But as a player and somebody who wants to be interactive and make it an interactive experience, it was dull as, steel gray. I mean, it was just as dull as a butter knife. And it was like and it's funny because then we drove all the way back to, Detroit, me and Dave, and Dave complained all the way back, and I probably complained all the way back about how boring that was. And it was kind of an eye opener. Whereas they thought it was really cool because he was telling a really cool story. But this was probably the only thing they knew. This was their experience at Dungeons and Dragons. So they thought probably that all dungeon masters do everything for them, so they really don't have to do anything. And it's different structure, different folks again, but it made me even think more about the fact that I want input from the players. If they decide to do something I'm not expecting, you know what? I'll roll with it. I'll adapt to it. Some people can handle that. Some people cannot as dungeon masters. And I've experienced those types too. So I think you should remain flexible as far as the storyline. Have an overarching storyline, but be able to adapt very quickly because nobody wants to sit around a table or on these days online while you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. It's they want instant gratification. They want to keep moving forward ahead. You make a few mistakes, oh well, you can always fix it. But sitting around for 20 minutes while the dungeon master's trying to figure, I wasn't expecting them to do that, so now what do I do? Okay, I got to roll some characters or something, some NPCs. Or it's just, have tools where you can have an easily adaptable NPC that you can throw in there to deal with that situation and keep it flowing. I mean, that would be probably my biggest advice is the storytelling aspect and to keep it fun for the players. And any long stretches of sitting around and twiddling your thumbs is not fun for the players.
It is not. And over and over again that the metric for a good campaign, how much fun is everyone having?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, the other thing is you can go the other direction and have too much fun. And what I mean by that is like, you got first level characters, I want them to come back and play again next week. So you're handing out the treasure at the, after you've, slain, 2 orcs. Oh, there's a +4 sword, here, we'll get that, and that was one of the things too I learned, and that's probably one of those things I learned in my Hamburg days was that, you can give them a +4 sword, but then the next time they're expecting a +5 sword.
Yeah.
So you have to not get too carried away with having the fun. I mean, it's so hard to balance that. I mean, and the other option is you could go, it's a +4 sword, but then you find out that it's cursed, and then the adventure is to try to lift the curse off this +4 sword, and hopefully by that point they're, 7th level or something, so I mean, so then that's correcting that mistake you might have made or whatever, getting back to that part. It's a challenge, and it's always hard to keep topping yourself all the time. That's why I'm kind of using the treasure analogy, but it's kind of the same thing for your storylines too.
So, what would you say then is your style of encounter? Does that question make sense? Like for a battle. So, within a campaign, would you rather have a bunch of like quarter challenge rating enemies, or have a CR that's kind of at the level of the players and have them just fight one enemy, or like one big bad, or maybe have like a slow snowball of enemies?
Well, I think it depends on the party and the level and maybe the skills of the players. I mean, a low level, it's like, okay, you killed the gelatinous cube, and they have +1 sword in them, or something like that. I mean, just stuff to get them in increments. And it's funny. It's like I probably swung the pendulum the other way, where it was basically kill every character, hopefully at first level, to okay, we're going to nurse this character till at least he gets to 12th level or something like that. Because, when you first start, it's fun making 20 different characters, but it gets kind of old after a while. And people get attached to them too, which is fun because then they take on a persona and they start acting like they think the character might act when they're role playing. So I guess at low levels, you try to keep it pretty simple, and challenge, and not necessarily over challenge them. But as you get higher level, you want to make it at least interesting and challenge. And I keep thinking back to one of my players, Evan, and I think his character was like about 17th level mage / he was doing a class. I think maybe a mage or something like that. And we were fighting something, and he goes, he had we had played for probably a year, and he accumulated a ton of stuff. We played every Friday, and he goes, well, he goes to roll his saving throw for something that they're being attacked with, and he goes, I'm invincible, and he rolls it, and he rolls a 1 for the saving throw. And we teased him mercilessly on that one for months after that. And he took it with good, good as grace he probably could. Because, like I said, we probably, we played every day, day or every week, on a Friday, and pretty long, late into the night usually. And again, you grow attachment. And all these characters they had the personas, and they grew attached to them. So it was quite a blow, but it was also kind of, I rolled it. I rolled a 1. What can I say? I jinxed myself. And that was kind of the difference going back to that when I went to that Lake Geneva and played that guy, is he could have rolled a 1 behind that screen. But how do you tell that? Oh, I just rolled a 1. Well, your character's dead. It's a lot different when the character does it. And it's like you have nobody to blame but the 20-sided dice, or yourself. And these are all the little tricks you learn after a while, I guess. But we end up starting another guy out, and and it was funny. He had like an elaborate, he had like 10 sheets for this character. He had a picture that he had gotten from some place. He'd made a copy of, and so when you have a character that you have so much work into it, you don't just want to arbitrarily say, oh, that orc had, that first level orc had a poison sword, and you're dead. It was an epic battle that he died in, and like I said, it was nothing. I had nobody but himself to blame at the end. That was kind of fun. That was a fun campaign. That was actually. And I played with this group for probably 4 or 5 years.
Dad, can you speak directly, please?
Oh, I played with this group for probably 4 or 5 years. And it was like, you remember Dennis and Rob Tiplady and Evan and Eldon.
Yeah.
And all of them. And probably the funnest thing was we did a Ravenloft thing, a side thing. They had gone through the Ravenloft portal from, my campaign setting. And we're on this mission. And, they're probably 15th level or something like that. And through a series of mistakes at the very end, the final climactic battle, they all got wiped out. and it was kind of their own fault, so there wasn't much complaint. I think one character ended up teleporting away and did a little side thing and got away or whatever. But, these were like, I think there was probably 10 players at that time. So it was, the carnage was pretty horrible. But the players couldn't really, it's nice when they don't blame you as a DM. It's like, oh, we made some stupid mistakes. There was infighting in the party, and they didn't necessarily have the best strategy. So, again, not necessarily the DM's fault.
How do you deal with player death?
It kind of depends on the situation. The nice thing with Planescape, there were some options of like making pilgrimages to maybe get resurrected or the raised dead. There was a period where that was very popular. But then after a while, it's like, well, then there's no fear of dying as a character. Then what's the sense of adventure? So I used it pretty judiciously after that little spree. Like in a sense with Eben, I think, it was Eben. Or was it? Yeah, it was Eben. And he, whatever the saving throw was, I was disintegrate, I want to say. So it was like, oh, well. That's that.
Just poof, you're gone.
Yeah.
Do you have...
Good times.
Yeah, well, everyone likes dying. Do you have a favorite monster?
That's actually a pretty good question. I mean, for some reason, when you first said that, Umber Hulk came to mind for some reason. and I'm sure that's not the norm. I'm partial to dragons. Both good and evil, but probably preferably a red dragon. Just because it's kind of like the iconic monster, maybe, for the game.
It's classic.
Yeah, it's when people think of Dungeons and Dragons, dragons right there in the title. So, I think, the thing that kind of, I wish had been the same thing, maybe when I first started playing was, like the Tolkien movies, for example, the Peter Jackson movies. It's like, there you see what a dragon looks like. This is what a dragon does. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really fun. You get out of the book to a degree, but the visual of it is definitely a different animal. But yeah, I probably we'll go with red dragon.
Red dragon. And what would you say, maybe for first level characters, what sort of animal or monster out there?
Probably, your share of orcs, hobgoblins.
I'm a fan of
kobolds. Yeah, kobolds are, goblins. The aforementioned Gelataneous cube, although that was always such a weird thing. It's kind of a weird monster. But a dungeon call, it comes in for. A lot of the natural animals are kind of fun too at low level. Like a lynx or something like that, or, some big cat, bears. And those are pretty challenging at low level too. And so it usually takes, people that get along, get a party of like 4 or 5 people to take down a bear, and probably not get somebody killed. So those are always kind of maybe the little phase of whatever campaign. But yeah, there's orcs are the classics, especially if it's a good party. Obviously, depending on the alignment of the party makes a big difference too.
Have you played campaigns where people are evil aligned?
Oh yeah. I think that Ravenloft one actually was an example of that. And like I said, it kind of ended up with all of them dead at the end because they were all kind of working at cross purposes, which I thought was good role play.
Do you feel like it's... Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to say, evil players can still use teamwork, but they may not, necessarily worry about saving their fellow characters,
Right. So how would you, in your experience, get player... I know everyone you played with, you all played together, like, so long, so often, that it kind of intricately builds a bond between players, but how would you suggest getting your players to interact with one another? Because I feel like that is the core of Dungeons and Dragons. It's not, I'm here telling a story. It's, we are here together. I'm guiding you, but ultimately, I need you guys to talk to each other.
Yeah, and that is, I think, getting the online thing and maybe your situation. I was fortunate, like I said, it was kind of that, when I was in the summer of 4th grade or 5th grade, the guys I played with, we all played. There was a couple other guys that joined us. We were all friends. We knew each other from school. There was a common background and similar interests. And then when I was playing with those later guys, they were all friends. I was kind of the outsider who came in, but they had all gone to school together and grown up together. And then, a couple times we had a couple friends of their friends that maybe the other guys didn't know. And one guy, Carol, comes to mind, and he never blended into the rest of the group, and he showed up for a little while and then stopped playing, and that's going to happen in any campaign. I mean, it got to the point where there was like that one campaign, there was like 12 people, I think, and maybe even more at one point. And we tried a thing with like an assistant DM, and then me as the DM, as like the head DM, and then Dennis as like the assistant DM. So if people went inside things or whatever, he would take over a part of the party or whatever. But in all practicality, it wasn't a great system. I don't know. Maybe something could have worked out maybe better over time, but it's hard to have more than one person running a campaign at the same time. A lot of the stuff's in your brain. Yeah, it's not real. And again, that adapting thing, and it's kind of hard to keep somebody else up to date with this stuff like on the fly. Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting experiment, but didn't really work. The nice thing was then a couple of guys kind of divorced themselves from the friendship of some of the people who were the main group of people who were playing, and so then we got back down to 10. That was in tennis, and that seemed to be a pretty good amount. But again, that's all people who know each other. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of putting up with stuff that maybe 6 strangers playing together are not going to be able to do. And I don't know. I really have never been put in that position, so it's hard for me to really talk about it.
So, did you all have to work around each other's schedules, or if someone didn't show up of your 10 to 12 people, did you just say, meh, they're just not here this week?
No, I actually look forward to the fact that maybe some people weren't going to show up, so it was 8 people instead. But it was such we had such fun. It was, and you remember probably growing up, it was Friday nights, and they all showed up. I mean, it was fun. It was a good way, to let loose and kind of, the work week was over. Most of them worked 9 to 5 jobs, Monday through Friday. So Friday night, ready to, have a few beers and play. And yeah, I don't know. There was never really any problems on that. And I know you've mentioned some issues with the campaign you're running, but again, I think with this group, since they all knew each other so well, they were friends already to begin with. They wanted to see their other friends and they wanted to hang out with them. So that probably sweetened the pot as far as running the camp and having a tournament. If that makes sense.
It does. For the record, I love my players, and my campaign right now is great. I just wish that we could play more.
That's what I'm sorry. I wasn't throwing you under the bus. I know you were saying
it's fine.
You're unhappy about something, and that's what it was. Actually, that you wanted to play more.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, it's schedules. That's a lot of it. Fortunately for us, like I said, most of them are Monday through Friday. We're employees. Friday night was open for everybody pretty much. So it was a thing. So, but, this was 10 years ago too. And, things probably have changed a little bit maybe since then also, especially being in the middle of COVID.
I feel like it was more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was slightly more than that. It was about...
Probably closer to 20.
I've been here 12 years.
Okay.
And that's the only reason we stopped the campaign pretty much was I moved up here and it just wasn't practical because they're all down in Detroit areas, Lansing. And you know what? I was probably burned out on it, to be honest with you too. At that point, it's some work. And I don't know if your players appreciate that or not, but there's a lot of work as a dungeon master. It's not just showing up there with your player characters, sheet every week and your dice. Like I said, I would kind of think about, okay, this is what they did the last time. We left out, we stopped here. All right, now where am I going to go with the story? And I would spend several hours then planning what was going to, happen next. And then, sometimes things would go awry or they would go in a complete opposite direction than I expected. And it's like, okay, all right, I can adapt to that. I might end it earlier that night because not really sure where I was going to go after that. But then the next week I'd start the cycle again. It's like, okay, I left them there. All right, so this is what they did last time. Let's go here. And I don't know. I never wanted the players to make it feel like, oh, I got to do this. I mean, maybe there's a quest. It's like, but how they get to that, the end of that quest. I like to think the players can determine that. I mean, it goes back to that learning how to DM. There was a guy, Tim, who when it was his turn to DM, when we were back in 5th, 6th grade, when he joined a little later than everybody else. It would be, okay, you go on a dungeon crawl, you go to the first room, there's a tunnel going to the second room, there's a tunnel going to the third room, and you would go through 20 rooms in that order, and then there'd be a big boss at the end. Which, is great if you're playing, Mario or something like that. It's great to kill that big boss, but it always just felt so contrived, and just that I don't have there's no decision making that goes into this. I can't go down, there's actually 3 corridors in this room, 3 doors. I could go to A, B, or C. It was just like, door A to door A to door A to door A. And it was not that exciting, It wasn't that much fun.
Can you think of a moment where your players have, truly thrown you off?
I mean, I hate to keep flogging that Ravenloft thing, but that was the one. It was kind of like, I mean, they were basically at the very end of the module. I don't know if you remember the Ravenloft module. There's a series of them, and it was fun. It was kind of like I really enjoyed it a lot because it was like a gothic, Transylvania type country, and there was vampires and Frankenstein and things. And they got to the end, and it was like, okay, I'm like, propping forward, thinking, okay, they're gonna wrap this up. We can move on. They'll find the portal out of Ravenloft, get back to our land, and like I said, things went just awry. I mean, but the fun thing was that they stayed within character. They're all pretty much evil. Might have been a couple neutral characters, and what they did, is like brought it on themselves. It was kind of like, all right. Well, I guess next week we're going to start at the first level characters and start a new campaign. So everything I had planned after that went out the window pretty much. But I don't know. I think if you have enjoyed the game, it's it doesn't matter. To me, at first level can be just as fun as 20th level. And it's just, a different way of DMing. But, it's, if you have a strong campaign to begin with, it doesn't really matter what the expectations just change a little bit.
Have you played any other role-playing systems other than D&D? I feel like the answer is no, which is why I didn't really ask.
No, we played... This is back when, maybe back in that 5th grade thing again. It was a science fictional based role playing game that I can't remember for the life of me. It was kind of a post apocalyptic world type thing. And I think maybe the reason we tried it was because we were just getting sick of killing each other off at first level. So we figured, let's try a new campaign setting where we can kill each other off at first level. God, I wish I could remember what that is. I'm sure maybe one of your listeners might remember it. But yeah, we tried it for a few weeks maybe or something. And really, I don't know. It's just not that classic thing of the fantasy thing. Maybe that goes back to that guy, that Man of a Thousand Faces, or what is that thing called? Like Joseph Campbell. It kind of goes to that Joseph Campbell thing where I think maybe with fantasy, like where you're drawing from all these, templates or legends, templates of legends that have been passed down from generation to generation in cultures, and maybe there's some kind of connectivity there. I'm not a spiritual person, but I think we've for generations, people know what dragons are. You try to go, into something else like futuristic. It's kind of a harder sell, I think, because you don't got those archetypes that you can draw upon. And I think a lot of it is, for me, was the wonder of, Tolkien. I don't know if you've read the Lord of the Rings books, actually, or The Hobbit.
You read me The Hobbit.
Yeah, I did read you The Hobbit, now I think about it. I read you and Holly. And I think the beauty of it is I remember as Mrs. Mommer in 4th grade English, or 7th grade English, I think, said, hey, there's a series of books you might really like. Oh, really? So, yeah, I'll bring them in for you. And that's how I got introduced to the Hobbit, and then the Lord of the Rings too. And so going back to that archetype, that's a blueprint for probably, what do you want to say, 75% of fantasy. I mean, the funny thing was reading Sorcerer and sitting there thinking, wow, this is quite a ripoff of Lord of the Rings, and something about him. I mean, he was well grounded in Norse mythology and, Old English and all those things, and took those legends and kind of made them his own. You read the Silmarillion after that and see, wow. And that's what's fun. If you can do a campaign where you have this history that goes back thousands of years, and your players know what this history is, and you can kind of tell them, meet some old wizard, talks about, Agmar the Great or whoever, and then what they did, 1,000 years ago, and somebody stirred his spirit, so that history, and that's why, like I was telling you earlier, I've pretty much stuck with the same campaign setting I've had all this time, because there's a big history behind it, and I've included the history of the players who played in there and the things they've done, and I have records of that. And it's hard for any other game system, I think, to tap into that same thing. That's my extended answer to your question.
Do you feel like 3.5 was kind of, I know that's where you stopped, but was that kind of the epitome of the rule sets?
Yeah, I mean, you adapt to whatever they are. We kind of come to a consensus. Oh, let's try this, or whatever. The big thing between, playing when I was a kid, I'm going to say, 5th grade as a kid, and when I was playing as an adult, was the group I played with adult had probably 1,000 miniatures between them. As opposed, we didn't use a single miniature with, we might use our dice or something like that to show where people are in the room on a piece of graph paper. So, it could be just as much fun. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, it could be just as much fun in that. But I think having the miniatures definitely changed things. Again, you get that attachment thing because everybody's got the same character they use every week. They put out on the pad or whatever, and they would paint them the way they were, and they would, say, hey, Dennis, I need a Balrog, and he'd go searching through his cases. Okay, there's a Balrog, and it made it a lot more immediate. I think it did actually improve the game quite a bit, because at that point, you've played long enough, you've seen most everything. So it was kind of like that next step into playing.
So you're saying physical assets are better than a rule set?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. And I don't know if you could do that online where you got I have a grid pad on some kind of space age polymer or whatever it is. And you can draw out the room or whatever, the temple, and, put the characters on there and say, okay, you're 10, you're 20 feet away. Here's what you do. What are you going to do? It's your turn. It's your turn, the initiative. And I think that makes it more immediate, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's what you can do. Is that how you do it online? I'm just curious.
You didn't watch our live stream of fighting Strahd, who I believe is in Ravenloft.
Yeah. Strahd was the big bad guy.
Yeah, so
actually in those modules.
We did we tried to do a speed run of killing Strahd. We were hoping to get it done in a few hours, and we definitely spent 12 hours. And that was without exploring anything, a straight run up to kill Strahd. But we live streamed it, we played it online, and Brian uses Astral Table, which is a virtual tabletop, and I don't know if he purchased it or if he made the asset, but there is his complete dungeon online. You can set it up, you can do Fog of War, so your players can't see beyond the room they're in, or they can't really see beyond what their actual visual set would be. So it's pretty sophisticated at this point, and it's really cool. He also has a subscription, I believe. I'm not as online as everyone else, to D&D Beyond. And so he has all the books on there, and they do have the ability for you to make your character sheet online. Which was kind of cool. I don't know if it's my newness to 5th edition or what, but it felt really weird making my character online and kind of just ticking all of these boxes. Like it was procedural, okay, so you pick your race, alright, this is your race, okay, so you pick your class, this is your class, these are the things you pick for your class. There wasn't that sense of looking over everything and kind of dividing up your skill points. It's all in 5e, it's pretty this is what you're doing.
Which I think sucks all the fun out of it, maybe a little bit. But, yeah. I mean, they've tried different variations over the years. I seriously, I think a big part of it is it just forces you to buy the books again. It's just kind of a money-making venture. And I get it, they gotta, everybody's got the 3.5, we're not selling any of our product anymore. Okay, let's update it, make it 4th edition. It is what it is. And, I've over the years tried it, those different variations. I mean, for a while I was using music, specific background music, adventures, and going back to that Red Steel, they actually had a CD with music on it. That was in one of the things, which you'd have that foreboding music or frenetic music depending on the situation, and it was kind of fun for a while. But when it comes down to it, there's enough distractions as it is when you're trying to run a campaign that the practicality kind of went out the window after a while. And there was template as far as music went. But I tried different things over the years, but it always kind of comes back around to the same thing. It's, the story. If you like playing with people you play with, and if you have time.
Do you have thoughts on rules in particular? Do you use a lot of house rules?
The fun thing was, it wasn't really so much house rules. I mean, there might have been some misinterpretations of rules, so we kept playing them wrong. The fun kind of thing was actually, when I was playing with that later group, 2 of them were lawyers. So, rules, if I heard it, if there's any divination, or divergence on rules, maybe I was thinking something wrong. So, they were, I wouldn't call them, not necessarily rule Nazis, but they knew the rules in and out because that's what they did for a living. So it was actually very nice to have them playing with us because, you felt like, okay, I could lead on as a crunch. It's like, oh, what's the rule for blah, blah, blah? Oh, go to page 3365 and so, and the thing is everybody else respected the other players. Like I said, they all play, knew each other very well. And, if Rob said this is the rule for that, it was like, okay, we'll go with that, or I'd look it up, whatever. The thing was, like I said, being lawyers, that's what they do for a living. So the other one was Dan. There was 2 of them, actually. And they knew the rules inside and out. So, and I can understand that being maybe an issue with other people. and you get some players that, try to bend the rules to their advantage as much as possible. I had a couple players like that, and it's just kind of like, enough already. This is what's going to happen. And that's it. So you can have different types. I mean, I'm trying to remember what the name I had for a couple. There was a couple guys in particular that they would just try to manipulate things, and so they got the best, the best treasure pick, and that kind of stuff. And you say, if you just have to put your foot down,
Mm-hmm.
you got to treat everybody fair. Don't use the rules to get your way, basically. And again, that's what's nice having, Robin and Dan, because they would say, well, that's probably not, because according to this rule, and that would be the end of it, because they respect it too.
That's that player type, as far as I know, is called a rules lawyer. And I guess maybe that would be where that comes from, specifically your two lawyer friends.
But they're very good natured, and they didn't use the rules to manipulate things for themselves, which was the amazing.
Yes.
Because they were good people.
Yeah.
And but I knew I could lean on them for a crutch. Like, I can't remember if you have to see somebody in order for somebody to shoot a magic missile at them, and they'd say, okay, well, it's in this book here, blah blah blah, page whatever. And I'm just trying to do an example off the top of my head. Of course, I know you can't. But that was a kind of things that they brought to the table. It could be definitely be a team effort with the players as well as the Dungeon Master.
I know for all of my campaigns 3.5, I've changed the way that grappling works, which it sounds like is how grappling works in 5th edition.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and I haven't gotten enough. I think I think I passed on some books too.
Yeah,
you probably have one. Maybe 4th edition. Was that? I don't even say that 4th edition.
No, I have 3.5.
I have 3.5. Yeah, I still think 3.5. I mean, I really like that system. It seemed to work really well.
I do too.
But I still think Windows 7's good. So and it just may be because I was used to it, and I got to learn a whole new system over again, and that doesn't appeal to me sometimes. Yeah.
Well, I think bringing up the whole notion that some of your players know the rules can kind of lean on that. I think that brings back to D&D, a team game. Like, it's not about one single person. And I think 3.5 does that exceptionally well, where, you can make a very sort of like specific niche character, and that's okay because you're part of a bigger party. So you can rely on them to fill the gaps that maybe your character can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he just bring that point up reminds me back to my Hamburg days, because it was definitely the DM against the other players. It was, I'm going to find a way to kill you. It's like I said, it was new, it was different. So, hey, cool, I get to make a new character up again. I'll try a new class this time, but, after doing it, 40 times, it kind of gets old after a while. And it's like, God, I'd really like to get to 2nd level. That'd be kind of cool. See what happens then.
I get to pick another feat at 3rd level, maybe.
I get to use a new table.
Do you have, when you play, or when you used to play, a favorite class?
Yeah,
or a favorite character that you've made?
Oh, yeah. Volkmar was probably one of my favorites. He was Sir Volkmar. Everybody likes the knight kind of thing. He was a fighter, but, of royal blood. And I think he got, maybe the 10th level. I think he was one of the first ones that got up to a decent level that, from my youth. But I really enjoyed Wizards a lot. It was just the problem back then is, when you're killing characters willy-nilly, is that, you know, you got a 4-sided dice to roll your hit points at first level with a magic user. So, needless to say, not many survive very long. But then, you know, when I played other people, excuse me, they got like higher levels. And we did eventually, you know, that same group of people, we finally realized that it was no fun just killing everybody up. Then we started getting up to like 7th, 8th, 10th level. Kurt was you know, when I was a DM, Kurt would DM, and Kurt was very stingy. So it was, you know, as far as treasure goes and that kind of thing. So, but that one of those characters was Volkmar. His favorite character was Alanon, who was a druid, which I don't know if you've read the Shannara books or not, but there's also a druid in the Shannara series, so obviously see where he got that name from. But, you know, he got him up. You know, back then, I don't know if it's still the way the system is, but back then, you got to be like the Grand Druid. I think you could only get to the Great Druid or the Arch Druid, whatever the heck it was. You could only go up to like maybe 15th level or something. So that was kind of a bad, you know, for dungeon crawl, druids weren't the best either. I mean, it was kind of like the poor man's cleric, basically. And that's maybe what the later editions have improved, is some of those things, as not to make, you know, some of those character classes so one-dimensional. You know, I really like you know, one of my favorites was actually doing a thief, you know, magic user thief, you know, doing a dual class. Which can be a lot of fun. You know, get a little extra hit points, and, you know, magic, thievery, you know, they kind of go hand. And I'm pretty partial to all of them. You know, I mean, I had a cleric, and I can't top his name off the top of my head, who I used for a long time. So yeah, it's again, it goes back to that Joseph Campbell thing, and the archetypes. You know, those are the 4 classic Dungeons and Dragons, you know, classes.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, back then you had like a bard, but, you know, what's a guy playing a guitar gonna do in a battle? Although my friend Doug had one, and I do remember his name was Ragu, which I guess was just one of those dates that you remember. But, you know, it was kind of, I mean, you had some fighting abilities, but, you know, you were kind of limited on some things too. But, you know, the assassin was kind of a fun one too, but really kind of blended up dimension again, because how many people are going to assassinate? In retrospect, it'd be probably kind of pretty fun to do that. You know, now I would look at it a different way, but in a dungeon crawl or something like that, they're not really that effective.
Would you say then that more of the campaigns that you ran were dungeon crawl, or they weren't?
Yeah, that's what they started it, and then, you know, once I started fleshing out my campaign setting, then, you know, there might be a dungeon crawl involved into it. I think the Undermountain one, I think I adapted to fit into mine, which is actually a very fun module. I think there's actually one called Return to Undermountain 2, which I hate that one. But the Undermountain was a nice, you know, TSR box set. And yeah, I think it was set in the Forgotten Realms world, but it could be easily adapted to my world. And that was a pretty fun, you know. I mean, there's a good old, you know, the good old fashioned dungeon crawl can be pretty, you know, pretty good time, root for and fun. But I think it's more of a supplement to, you know, what's going on around the greater world.
And your campaign setting, what is your world called?
Arth. Which was ARTH.
Okay.
And the basic premise being that there was gods, and the world is mostly populated by orcs. There's 21 gods, and they're divided into 7 neutral, 7 good, 7 evil, and they each all have a different realm that they're in charge of. So what a bunch of them agreed to is to pool the resources and open an interdimensional pathway between our world and their world. And so at various times, you know, some Viking ships were brought over here, and they settled in more the northern area of my campaign setting. The Byzantine, the later Roman Empire fleet on the way to fight the Vandals in North Africa were transported through, and they established like a Romanesque empire. Phoenicians at a different time period got brought through. So it was not. I mean, it worked really good in the sense that I kind of have those backgrounds, of those different cultures and their languages and how they do things.
So you have historical fiction D&D.
Right. But they've had to adapt their countries and establish themselves in a fantastical land. And then, of course, you still have your elves, your dwarves, who were already there, and your orcs and kobolds. Kobolds never came very often.
I just think they're neat.
But there was an evil, a very Sauronanish or Sauronanish version of the evil empire, and whatever my version of the Easterlings were. So you always have to have conflict of some sort. Have the big picture storyline going. But yeah, so then there's conflicts between those countries and between orcs, and there's a big backstory. There was actually an earlier Roman group that were transported through, who tried to enslave the entire world and were vanquished. So, but some of their monuments and whatnot still survive, and there was very. I have a whole history right now of like major events that happened and stuff, and and I've actually been working on a novel on it, but I mean, I kind of put it aside because I'm working on a different one right now. But actually, the other day I thought of something and said, "Oh, that's a nice thing about computers. I go on there, I have it saved as a file, and someday I'll finish it." But I had an idea for something I could throw it on there really quick. So it's been in progress for 20 years. It was originally handwritten out, and it was typewritten out, and now I'm putting it in a file on the computer. So there's that history, and it's like, so I know how that works. And again, as a DM, it's kind of nice to know your world inside and out, and how your history works. So when people are interacting in the local town, you're not just going to have necessarily, orcs and humans and dwarves, but you might have Macedonians or Phoenicians and Vikings or actually like the Norsemen that can also interact too. So it adds a whole layer to things.
What are you doing, sir?
Oh, it's just moving some dice.
You say you're moving some dice?
Yeah, I was just kind of
reminiscing.
But yeah, it's that was the part I enjoyed most, as a storytelling. After all these years, that's I thought about when this interview before we had it. That was one of the things. To me, it always come back to the storytelling and involving the storytelling. That's the fun. And different people, it's different strokes for different folks, different people. But that was my passion.
You're getting a little quieter. I don't know if you're. Or...
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was kind of further away.
Obviously, good story. Being able to adapt as necessary. I know for myself, and I believe as well, maybe Kyle and Brian too, where we tend to have like bullet points. And as far as like things in the story that should happen eventually, or goals that maybe should be achieved, but other than that, just letting players do whatever and seeing what happens. You say that is how you would run campaigns as well?
Yeah, I mean, it depended on what I was doing at the time. If it was a dungeon crawl, I probably did more details than that. And the thing too is, I was just thinking about this that we really haven't touched on is that random encounter. I figured out for depending on the climate, when a percentage is laid out, it's like okay, they're doing the Peter Jackson trip from one city to another city, and instead of just seeing panning shots of the party running from one city to the next city, they ran into some werewolves. And that could change things. It's like somebody could be grievously injured. And, okay, well, we were supposed to go to that city, but maybe we better find a cleric or somebody to take care of this, so we're going to have to stop in this little village or whatever. So I like the, I don't know. And I know a lot of DMs aren't like that, but I like the volatility, the randomness of real life. It's like, I guess there's predestination. That's what some people believe in. But I like to think there's a lot of random events, and sometimes those random events can be very impactful. So that was, and I think there was in one of the books, I think that's what I started out with. I want to say the DM's Guide, I think maybe had charts for random, depending if it was, mountains or plains or whatever, and you go percentages. And that's the thing, too, is like, I think I would use those charts, but it's like, oh, wait, I don't usually use that monster in my campaign setting. So let's see, what's the next one? I'll use that one instead. They don't, players don't see what you're rolling. So, that might fit better in the storyline, too. I tried to be pretty strict, but keep to it because, again, to really, for it to be truly real. And I also would have a list of NPCs, in case that could be easily adapted. Maybe they're running into a party on a pilgrimage to some temple or something. They just happen to be the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time, depending on the alignment of the party. I don't know. I'd have reoccurring characters, that they would run into. I'm sure that's covered. I would try to avoid the do ex machina, the one guy, Gandalf showing up to pull their fat out of the fire every time. That can get pretty lazy. And kind of, stretches the incredulity or the credulity of the party, and maybe makes them start thinking, oh, I don't have to worry about anything because I know this guy's going to come along and save me. But yeah, I mean, God, you can go on for hours and hours talking about DMing. There's a lot of thought that gets put into it.
Yeah, I really like D&D. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Thanks for making this my life. The earliest I remember is we had like a D&D board game, didn't we?
Yeah. I'm trying to. I think that was like the basic set or whatever, maybe.
And it had
even maybe more basic than that. Maybe that was even like
it had like player cards and stuff. Because I remember I was like 5, I think, and we were playing it like as a family. And I wanna say I was a thief, and there were gargoyles involved.
Yeah, I think that didn't it come with like little?
It came with little cards and stuff. I think like a mat.
Right.
I would ask if you could end with like your favorite D&D goof or player goof, but I kind of feel like Eben saying he's invincible.
Yeah. It was almost like the fickle finger of fate. It was like, you just jinxed yourself. You should never, never, ever say that. You do not say, I'm invincible. And, maybe as a DM, I would have taken that as a challenge, actually. But unfortunately, I'm rolling a 1 for 6. It was all become a moot point at that point.
All right. Well, thank you, Dad, for spending this time with me. Is there anything else you'd like to add or say?
No, just keep on rolling and have fun doing it. And I'll look forward to watching the next episode on the podcast.
Dad.
All right, sweetie.
Thank you for sitting in on this session. You've gained 200 experience points. Rolling Into Your DMs was produced by Steve and Brian, written by Kyle and Chris, and created by Steve, Brian, Kyle, and Chris, with the help of a handful of dice. You can find us on Twitter at RollingIntoYourDMs. That's rolling in the number 2 URDMs, or on Instagram at RollingIntoYourDMs. Join us next time, and don't forget your character sheet!